Let's discuss this whole situation tonight with our power panel. Rochelle Ritchie, former press secretary for the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. Charlie Kirk, executive director, Turning Point USA. And Buck Sexton, a former NYPD analyst and now contributor to TheHill.com. Welcome to all of you.
Good to see you.
Hi, Shannon.
Okay, so, Buck, you were one of the first folks out there asking questions about this. You took a ton of heat about it. How are those folks who came after you responding now?
I haven't gotten any apologies yet, Shannon, which is not surprising at all, but I think it tells us a lot about the media attitude here, which is that they're not going to learn. They're not going to learn the lesson. This was obviously a flawed story from the start. I know this because I came out and said that this is a flawed story. The moment that we were hearing things like he wouldn't turn over phone records, that he turned over redacted phone records, just the very line, "This is MAGA country." This is something that somebody who doesn't know any Trump supporters would think that Trump supporters during an attack like this would say. It just didn't add up. And I'm not saying the press had to say that he was a liar from the get-go. Of course, it's an allegation. It's very serious. But words like alleged, words like reported, and then following up to get evidence and facts, that's what the media is supposed to do. But as we know, they are activists. They are not journalists. And they will learn nothing from, once again, just like in Covington, being dead wrong.
All right, Buck, you mentioned this caricature of the persons that he said attacked him. This is what they say on nationalreview.com. The headline is, "Hate crime hoaxes reflect America's sickness." They say anyone not blinded by bias or panic should have been skeptical of Smollett's story from the beginning. He openly harbors an intense hatred for Donald Trump and his supporters, going so far as comparing them to Klansmen. That his alleged attackers perfectly fit this description should have raised eyebrows across the political spectrum. The cartoony screenplay villain portrayal of white Trump supporters was outrageously comical. Rochelle, your response to that?
Well, you know, when I first heard the story and the allegations that, Jussie Smollett had alleged happened to him, I supported him. I believed him. And the reason why I believed him, and I think a lot of other people like me believed him, is because it is conceivable to think that something like this could happen, unfortunately, in our country, considering how heightened racism and racist rhetoric is right now. But once the evidence sort of came out about the two brothers and him not turning over phone records, I started to look at this and I said, this doesn't seem quite right. And then I said, this is a slap in the face to anyone that has or will unfortunately be a victim of a hate crime. And it gives credence to this idea that when Black Americans or gay Americans say that they're being targeted by racists in this country, it gives credence for people not to believe us. So what Jussie has done has really been a disservice to anyone that has been a victim of a hate crime. And unfortunately, I cannot stand behind him on that.
Yeah, and we're still waiting to hear officially from the Chicago Police Department what they publicly want to say about so much of what is trickling out. So we're waiting for that official comment from them. Charlie, I want to read you something that was written by the executive assistant to the Washington Post editorial board. She says this: "If Smollett's story is found to be untrue, it will cause irreparable damage to the communities most affected," as Rochelle said. "The incident would be touted as proof that there's a leftist conspiracy to cast Trump supporters as violent, murderous, racist. It would be the very embodiment of, quote, fake news. And that reason more than any other is why I need this story to be true, despite its ugliness and despite what it would say about the danger of the world I live in." Charlie?
Yeah, there was a great point made earlier, which is there are real hate crimes in America, and this does a disservice to people that experience those hate crimes when they're manufactured, when they're planned, when you pay people to allegedly pay people to try to participate in them. This is what I call lottery ticket journalism, and this has been happening we have 3 examples of this over the last month, where journalists essentially just scratch off a lottery ticket hoping it to be true. We saw this with the Covington high school kids. We saw this with the Michael Cohen story, where Mueller actually had to come out and debunk the BuzzFeed story. Whatever happened to that, by the way? That disappeared really quickly. We saw this during the Kavanaugh hearings back in October. And unfortunately, this rush to judgment is creating an atmosphere where people want things to be true because it will fit their political narrative. And I hope we have not fallen that far as a country, but the hatred for Donald Trump is so great that the media class is clamoring to find these instances to confirm a narrative that they believe to be true, which is the antithesis of what journalism is supposed to be.
Well, again, new information trickling out this weekend. A lot of it still unconfirmed by Chicago police. We await to hear if there'll be another interview and what follows from that. In the meantime, Charlie, Buck, and Rochelle, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.